Hi everyone, I'm Kale Kettle. Welcome to this week's The Book Chain Project. Today, Amy McCaw, author of Vampire Stories set in New Orleans in a UA debut, is going to talk to Claire Fayers. Claire writes about myths and legends and whales and dogs that are sort of like Thor. She writes middle grade. It's a fantastic chat. I'll see you at the end. Don't forget, subscribe, like and share. Bye for now.
Hi, I'm Amy, if anybody's watching yet. I'm just going to see if Claire is ready to talk, and we'll get ready to start this episode of the Book Chain Project.
Yeah, you will.
That worked smoothly. Welcome.
It's like technology actually does what it's supposed to.
It's brilliant when it works, isn't it, first time? Right, since we're here and people are starting to tune in, I think we'll get started. So welcome to everybody who's watching and people who are watching later to this episode of the Book Chain Project. I'm absolutely thrilled to be joined by Claire Fayers, who is the author of Stormhound, as well as some other brilliant books for children. And I'm Amy McCaw. I'll be interviewing Claire. I'm the author of Mina and the Undead, which is a YA murder mystery set in 1995 New Orleans. So I'm really looking forward to this discussion. I think, strangely, although we were paired randomly, there are some similarities between our books that we can discuss. There are obviously some quite big differences too. So would you like to start by telling us a little bit about Stormhound and about your other books as well, Claire?
Yeah, great. Thanks, Amy. So I write middle grade comedy fantasy. When I read, I very often read very dark YA. So Mina and the Undead was the perfect book for me to read.
Oh, brilliant.
Yes, the kind of stuff that comes out of my head tends to be the sort of funny middle grade, but very much based on myths, legends, folklore, drawing on, I think, a lot of the things that you drew on in your book. So yeah, it is interesting that we can take the same sort of basis for stories and come up with such completely different things for different audiences.
Yeah, I love that. I love how you can have something like myths and legends and it can work from a very young audience right through to adult fiction. I picked up this copy of your book because I found that we were doing this event together, and actually I loved it. It isn't what I would normally read, but I am a curriculum consultant by day, and I think this is absolutely fantastic for primary age children and for adults who have an interest in things with a mythological flavour. So yeah, it was really good to discover your book. So let's get to the questions. Now we've heard a little bit about your writing. So we both, as we've said, explore mythology in our books. And I was wondering, which mythology did you use for those people who haven't read your book? And why did you choose to go for that mythology?
So in Stormhound, I did basically a mashup of Norse and Welsh myth. I've done big epic quests with comedy before and sort of fairy world type things with magic mirrors, and this was very different. And in this one, the mythology comes into our world. With my earlier books, they were all set in fantasy worlds with drawing on myth and legend, but completely imaginary worlds. This one was our world. In fact, it's Abergavenny, just up from the road from where I live now.
All right.
Very odd, because I just thought it would be enormously funny if some sort of great heroic figure turned up in this very down-to-earth little town where nobody will take anybody seriously if they start posturing about and saying sort of, I am a Stormhound, you must bow to me, and they sort of, and that's where the sort of idea came from, of the mythology encroaching into our world. But also with Welsh and Celtic myth, there's always a great sense that the other world is just out of sight, and if you take the wrong step on a path or wander a bit too far into a wood or whatever, you can just find yourself in the magical realm. And I love that sense that the magical world and our world are somehow very close together, and then occasionally they just touch and weird things happen.
Yeah, I think you blended those two mythologies beautifully. You almost couldn't tell where one ended and one began. And I think my favourite part was when the Stormhound lands and he's used to being this big, impressive figure, and you made him a cute, kind of helpless-looking puppy, and that he was just really angry about that all the way through. And I found that brilliant. And it reminded me, actually, of Thor kind of landing in the human world in the Marvel films. and
I
realizing that he had to adjust. And I think that sort of universal story is really appealing to kids and adults. Was that something that you drew on
Oh,
consciously?
definitely. In fact, when I pitched the story to my agent, I basically started telling her the story, and I said, actually, it's Thor with a dog.
What a pitch. You could like hear that and just go, no, I'm going to snap that up.
So,
So was it that particular myth? Because we've talked a little bit before this event, and obviously you're a huge fan of cats and you have pet cats. So I found it interesting that you went for a dog. Was it because of the mythological link that you chose a dog rather than going for cats?
yes, yeah, I started with this image in my head of the Wild Hunt with Odin or possibly King Arthur or possibly our own of the other world. The legend of the Wild Hunt just seems to crop up all over Europe and in different story cultures, and it's always somebody different who leads it. But yeah, in mine, it was Odin. It was the Norse Wild Hunt. It was chaotic. It was noisy. It's the thunder across Welsh mountains. And then this tiny little figure at the back of the dog trying to keep up and say, wait for me, everybody. And they just run off and he falls. And then, yes, what happened when myth collides with our world then. So, yeah, basically started with that. So it then had to be a dog. But
Yeah.
obviously, I did have to bring a cat in as well, obviously.
Oh, yeah, definitely. And I like the fact that a lot of his thought process was about cats as well, and just being really angry every time he saw a cat. Obviously, that wasn't drawing on your own love of cats at all. But yeah, I really liked the characters. I liked the fact that you had the animal kind of viewpoint, but then also shifted to the young girl. And I was wondering, is it plot that drives your writing, or is it that sort of strong sense of character that comes through it?
I think it's generally character. But sometimes the plot demands that the right characters are there. Because I started with Storm. I thought, right, okay, so this puppy now, Stormhound, has landed in our world. He's met a few rather sarcastic Welsh sheep already.
Yeah.
He needs, and obviously, the great hero quest things, the hero goes on the quest, he has allies, he has enemies. So I'm thinking, who's going to be the ally in this? Who's going to be the enemy? And I thought the perfect ally for the book, really, Storm was a girl whose story mirrors Storm's, that she's been pulled out of her previous life where she was in London with her family. Parents have got divorced. The father's got another job in Abergavenny and they've had to move. She's only ever been to Wales once before on holiday and it rained all the time. She hated it. And so she's been uprooted. And when they go to the rescue centre, because her father thinks having a puppy will help her settle down in a new place, and she really doesn't want the puppy at all, she just sees Storm and recognises something lost about him. And so they obviously end up then taking him home. So it started out with the plot needed the human ally, but very much after that, she drove the story of what would happen because there were choices that she would make.
Yeah, I think that was the perfect way of doing that in your book. It had that kind of pace, and the plot felt very plot driven, but at the same time, the characters had agency, so they were driving the plot, but then their traits kind of, like obviously Storm's traits of being really strong-willed and actually being a god or a god dog in a tiny little body, that drove the plot and I think created a lot of the comedy. Did you know straight off that it was going to be a comedy then, from that early pitch? Is that something you wanted to do?
I did, and I was trying to write a serious book, and I think that's why it turned into comedy, because I had written 3 comedies already, and comedy books don't tend to get taken seriously, and if you're a comedy author, unless you're one of the sort of massive famous ones, you're just, oh yeah, that's sort of the funny books in the corner. And I was sort of, look, I am magnificent, I am an author, everybody pay attention to me. I think that basically came out in the character of Storm, and I was trying to write something heavyweight and serious that people might notice, and yeah, it just didn't work. I think my mind doesn't work like that. And instead it came into this character who is desperate to be taken seriously, for people to actually recognise that he's a god in puppy form.
But that did come across really funny, didn't it? Because he is so serious, and like kind of the more serious and flamboyant and kind of angry he gets, like the funnier it is for the reader and the kind of characters around him. Like, oh, you're a cute little puppy. No, I'm not. I am Storm, I thought that was brilliant. I think I can write some sort of incidental comedy and like some witty dialogue, but I'm always in awe of somebody who can kind of sustain comedy through a whole plot. I think that's great, and actually make me laugh and smile all the way through reading it. So yeah, I really enjoyed that. I'm gonna have to look at my questions now because I feel like I've gone off on a tangent, but I'm enjoying the discussion. So on the subject of writing, that was what I was going to go on to next. You've talked about how you thought about the characters early on. Did you plot out in advance, or would you see yourself as like a pantser, kind of making it up as you go along, or are you some combination of both?
And I'm sort of in the middle. I lean towards make it up as you go along. And I actually, with Stormhound, it's slightly different to my other books. When I was planning my first books, I started out with just writing long lists of things I fancy put into a story and just tried to combine them, and then saw what would come up, and then I just started writing. Thought, right, what can I fit in? With Stormhound, I actually sat down and in one very angry burst, I wrote chapter 1 and
Wow.
then the last scene.
Right. That's
and I
brilliant.
thought, take that, computer! I am a serious writer. Look at me being serious. And I sort of stopped and I looked at it, and I thought, actually, I really like that. So it was
Great.
trying to join the beginning and the end, and I knew it was going to be some sort of mixtape then of a heroic epic quest. And obviously after the first chapter you think, yeah, this is going to be comedy. So I was patterning it then on the sorts of elements you get in quest stories, but with it being sheep and cats instead of
Yeah, it was brilliant. And I did, so you obviously thought of the beginning and the end and then filled in the gaps. Did you know early on what audience it was going to be for? Were you always ending it at that kind of, I don't know what you think, I see it as like the younger end of middle grade, kind of the upper end of kids who've moved on from chapter books and they want something a bit meatier. Was that your intention when you were writing from the very start?
Yeah, I mean, the intention was, whenever I write, I'm writing for myself mainly, which sounds terribly cliched, but I always write the story that's in my head and the one that I want to write at the time. But yes, the style of the first chapter, I thought, yeah, this is going to be slightly younger than my other books. And so it does help, having written a couple, to actually have an idea then of what I'm aiming at. And so I planned most of the characters then. I thought, right, who's going to be the villain, who's going to be who's going to be the sidekick, what other people are going to be in it. Got them in place, and then worked out sort of where it would happen and exactly what's going to be happening, and sort of planned and wrote together as I went along then.
Yeah, and it obviously all came together and worked for that audience. I mean, so do you find that writing for younger children, do you have to be quite conscious about the things, because you're taking from mythology, legends that can be quite dark? What did you have to do in terms of adapting that material? Did you have to change much or make it kind of palatable for children? Like, how did you approach that?
Yeah, that's interesting, because yeah, mythology can be very dark and also really comic.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the things I love about it, is it swings wildly from one to the other. It doesn't seem to have a sense of genre often. With Norse mythology, you have Ragnarok and everyone dies. You also get Thor dressing up in a wedding dress at one point, trying to fool somebody, and Loki shaving somebody's head just because he feels like it. It's like he got drunk and decided to do it. So you get these moments of high comedy, and then the moments of big tragedy as well, and they're sort of together. And so then obviously I went for all the comic bits, but also that sense of flamboyance and it being larger than life. Really trying to capture that with it.
So did you feel you had to tone down any of the violent elements, or did the comedy sort of outweigh that?
No, I think, yeah, some of the violence, if I was going for an older audience, I think we would have had a bit more physical violence and some bigger fights, particularly towards the end. So yeah, there's a case of having to keep it within what's acceptable for that age group. But
yeah, I had a similar thing where I didn't have to tone down too much. So the mythology I draw on in my book is New Orleans local myths. And it's mainly the vampire myth, because the idea of my book, if anybody doesn't know much about it, is that a serial killer is stalking New Orleans and turning the myths against people and killing people in the style of these myths. Oh, look, there's a handy copy just there. So because it was YA, I was able to have a little bit more free reign with the violence, but there were a couple of things that I toned down. There was one serial killer story There's a killer called Ed Gein who was one of the inspirations for The Silence of the Lambs. And he apparently used to kill people and use their skin to make things like lamps and stuff like that. So I kept that in there and described in a little more detail. And my agent just said, that's probably gone a step too far. And I read it and thought, yes, she's right. But yeah, generally I found that the mythology, I went as far up to a point with the violence, but there were certain historical things that I took out, like there were some mentions of slavery. And actually, because my book I wasn't writing it to unpick that or kind of, it wasn't to challenge that. It was more that the myths were meant to be fun. So some of that I shaped to fit my narrative a little bit more. So it wasn't kind of thinking about the wider audience. It was just trying to be responsible and thinking, what do I want to come out of it? And what do I want readers to take from it, if that makes sense?
Yes, I did love the way that you combined the vampire and serial killer things. I think it's such an obvious combination when you think about it.
Well, it was sort of accidental. I knew that I was writing a murder mystery and it was set in New Orleans, and I did a bit of research because I was toying with present day, and it turned out that 1995, the Interview with the Vampire film had just come out, and it was just after the deadliest year in New Orleans history where all these people had been murdered. So that somehow became entwined in my head, and I thought, what would happen in this vampire obsessed town if there was a real serial killer, and obviously the question of whether they are a killer or not. So although our books are completely different, I think we both wove the mythology in a way that just propelled the plot forward. And I don't know about you, but it was that there was a particular myth, which I won't spoil, that just gave me the idea for my whole book. Was it for you? It was the idea of the wild hunt then, and then what did you do to find the other myths that you reference through the book?
And the other main one I thought is the story of Ceridwen, who is a Welsh sorceress. And she came in because my agent didn't like my first idea for like that. I was going to have Morrigan and have a crow as a familiar, and my agent just said, no, everybody does that. Changes something else. And then I thought of Ceridwen, who shapeshifts into a hare. So having the sidekick who's a boy who can turn into a hare worked really well. And the original story is that she brewed this potion of all magical knowledge, which she was going to give to her son. And instead, the servant boy who was stirring it drank it at the appropriate point, and he got it all instead and sort of ran up on magic. So I thought, well, what happened maybe if her descendants after that have been trying to mop up this magic through the centuries, that all this magical knowledge had got into the world when it shouldn't have. And so they're basically acting like a sort of cross between Doctor Who and the Magic Police, that whenever something magical happens, they will turn up and try and put an end to it.
Yeah, I liked the fact that you started off kind of wondering what side they were on and what their agenda was. I thought that was really well done because it added this real sense of intrigue. Like, are they villains who's trying to hurt somebody, or are they actually doing good for the world? Was that something that you did intentionally? You kind of held that back from the reader?
That was definitely intentional on the second draft.
Yeah, right. Isn't that where the best stuff comes in, though? You get it out or for me anyway, I sometimes have to get it out, and then the better things come through.
Afterwards, that's the pants-sting thing of making it up as you go along. I think you write down an idea that's okay, and that gives you a better one that you can then go with.
So were there any myths or legends that you found during your research, or any that you've still got in your head that you want to use for future ones? Or is that, I don't know whether that's giving too much away about your future projects. Is there anything you're still holding back from your readers for the future?
Yeah, I did a lot of research into Welsh and local folklore, which is actually a fascinating subject. And there are things like there is literally one of the mountains that surrounds Abergavenny. There were 3 foothills at the bottom. My friend told me this. She said, if you look at them at a certain angle, it looks like they're walking into a giant dog. And I said, right, that's good in the book. And there's various stories about the top of Mount Skirrid, which is basically got this big jagged peak where a bit fell off probably during the Ice Age, but obviously it's far more exciting if the devil kicked it off during that.
Of course it is. Brilliant.
So there were lots of to the little bits of, to the snippets of folklore where people just look at a hill and think, well, why is it that funny shape? And somebody comes up with a story. After Stormhound, I have done this book, which is a part of the Scholastic's Classic series, which go out into schools, which is the collection of Welsh fairy tales, myths and legends. So a lot of the ones I've collected in Stormhound ended up going in that. And
So,
yeah, I will have some up my sleeve as well to put into other projects.
I love that you're so passionate about it. I think that definitely comes through your writing. Um, and I was just wondering then, so you got some of the myths and legends from things that people had told you. If other people are interested in either writing using mythology or reading myths, where would you recommend that they start in terms of source material?
So I've actually pulled together a whole load of sort of random books here. I will put a picture of it up on Instagram
Yeah,
afterwards.
great.
But Stephen Fry has done a really great collection in the past couple of years on Greek myth, and then one on Greek heroes, which are both great. Neil Gaiman is brilliant for the Norse mythology. And if you're looking at Welsh, you have to look at the Mabinogion, which is the sort of definitive Welsh legends and some of the oldest prose stories from the British Isles in there. And some of them are completely incomprehensible. You read them 3 times and then go back. But they're great. And then there's a whole load of other fiction. In the Scholastic series has also got Irish folktales and folktales from around the world. Catherine Fisher is a very well-known Welsh author who writes a lot of stuff very strongly based in Wales and on Welsh folklore. What else? Lloyd Alexander, if you're into Arthurian mythology, the whole Chronicles of Prydain, which I remember starting those several times because the first one starts off quite slowly and I was really getting a bit impatient. But then they're just incredibly good and get better with each book as he goes along. He just builds up this entire world of mythology as he goes. So they're really good.
Oh, they're great recommendations. I love the Arthurian legend, so I'll definitely check that one out.
Yeah, and the one other I've got here, because I read this the other week, and it is incredible, with Joanne Harris, which would be a sort of YA and like an Orfea, just a sort of female retelling of Orpheus.
Brilliant. I've not heard of that, and I love Joanne Harris.
Yeah, it is great. She's done a few of them, similar ones, with illustrations by Bonnie Hawkins, who lives in Monmouth, not far from me. It's really nice. And the illustrations are incredibly gorgeous. And the story in that one is fantastic. So, yeah, that's one you should really look at.
Yeah, I find with books that feature myths and legends, I don't know whether you feel the same, that when I'm reading them, if it's done really well, I find myself wanting to do more research and read everything around it. So as I was reading yours, I was kind of itching to look up each mythical reference. Is that something that you want readers to take away when you're including that? Do you want to kind of instill that love that you have?
Definitely, yes. I do have a few notes at the back of that book in case people want to go and read more. But these old stories, and they just tell us something about who we are. They're the sort of oldest things that people told when they were gathered around fires or sort of peering into a forest and thinking, I wonder what's behind that tree. And they say something about us and what we value and what we're afraid of and how we overcome our fears. And they're flexible. They can become serial killer vampire stories, or they can become comedy middle grade about puppies.
They can, and it's all to do with the mind of the author. So I don't know what that says about me, that's where I went with that, and you went to a humorous dog. But yeah, I like that, and I like the fact that we did different things with it. And I can see myself, I'm sure you're the same, in future books. I've already got ideas of different retellings and things that I want to put another slant on. Is that something that you will carry on with your career, do you think?
I think so. I'm currently working on a sci-fi fantasy, which is basically Jason and the Argonauts in
brilliant.
alternate space, which is a sort of mashup of Greek myth and very bad science fiction jokes.
So what age range is that aimed at?
That would be slightly older again, probably the same as my Accidental Pirates, which is my first one, which is about 9 to 12. I will be going to that again. And then I'm working on another just pure fantasy one at the moment, which is going to be fairy tale based.
Oh, I love a fairy tale. So is that fairy tales from a particular...
I froze.
I think we just lost the picture there for a little bit. I don't know what happened. Sorry, I was just asking you. So is that fairy tales from a particular culture, or is that, you know,
Um,
taken from different places?
Brilliant, sort of Grimm-esque with a bit of Celtic thrown in.
Oh, that sounds great. Um, so one other thing I wanted to ask you was, what advice would you give to people who are planning to write a book along a similar vein of using mythology? Is there any sort of tried and tested tips that you can pass on?
Oh gosh, I think first of all I'd just say read and read a lot. So read all around the sort of mythology that you're interested in, and then find out what books other people have done as well on the sort of subjects, so you can see how other authors have used the material, and then just play about with it and have fun. Take the characters out and put them into different settings. Have Thor having to go into Costa's and order a coffee or something, or whatever, and try mixing up settings and characters, which is always great fun, and that can sort of just help generate ideas. But
Yeah,
read and play.
that's really good advice. Thank you. The advice I always give at this point is to find critique partners that you can trust, because I think that that is one of the things that's really propelled my writing forward. Doing things like Write Mentor, where I had a mentor who sort of helped me to get my manuscript in shape. Do you find it useful to get feedback from other writers?
Lately, yes, I'm in a critique group. In fact, when we finish this interview, we've got a critique group Zoom meeting tonight where
Oh,
we've got
great.
character arcs and plotting. It started off with the Scooby Society of Children's Book Writers and Illustrators in Wales, and we'd started a global group in Cardiff of middle grade and YA, which we've sort of extended out to a few other areas of Wales now because we're doing it by Zoom. But that is just fantastically supportive, and you can hand over random ideas and chapters and bits to people, and yeah, they'll come back and say, yeah, this is great, or no, this is terrible, whatever.
It's like two levels of support, isn't it? It's helping you with your actual writing, and then it's people who understands that getting a book published is a really time-consuming, difficult, long thing. I'm in a group of debut authors, and it's been amazing just to hear different experiences and panicking. I haven't seen my cover yet. Is that normal? Oh yeah, that's fine. I think having people in your situation is really useful. So we've got a couple of minutes left, and I just wanted to ask you, I don't know whether I put this on the list of questions, what your publication journey was like. So how did you end up writing your first book? Did you go through the sending it to agents and things like that?
Gosh, it was really up and down over a long time. I'd written a thing, sent it off to agents, actually signed with an agent who sent the book out to a few people and then went completely silent on me.
Right.
And so I just thought at that point, I mean, the general accepted knowledge then is, yeah, if the book's been sent out, then you've had it, you've got no chance of that one. So I wrote it off, started working on something else, and thought, oh well, that would never see the light of day. Then I came across a Scooby competition called Undiscovered Voices. Thought, well, I might as well stick it in. I'm not doing anything else with it. Got to the final of that.
Oh wow.
This was an agent who I then signed with, and then the thing sold at auction a few months later, and I got a 3-book deal out of it. So
Brilliant.
it was really a case of it just coming out. The first time it went out, I think it was the one time everyone was wanting YA vampires. It was the Twilight era.
Oh gosh. And then that's kind of gone and then come back around.
I wrote to you, fortunately. But yeah, everyone was wanting the YA, and so they didn't want a funny book about pirates and evil magicians. And then when it came back around again, they'd all got their fill of the vampire books and were looking for funny middle grade, and mine just happened to land at the right time, I think.
And isn't that a lesson of, if you get rejections and you don't get where you want to be with it, that it isn't necessarily you?
Yes, and it's not necessarily the end, because
No.
yeah, I've got a friend whose book has come out this week. I think she said she's been about 20 odd years trying
Right.
to being published, and it's been turned down previously, and finally it's out. So yeah, if you've got an idea that you believe in and a story that you really feel you want to tell, then just keep pushing with it, because sometimes it is just a matter of timing.
Oh, well, that's a lovely point to end on. We're actually out of time now. So that is the end of my part of the Book Chain project, but you have still got another interview. It's your turn to be the interviewer next. So who will you be talking to, Claire?
Oh, will it? Yeah, there we go. I've done
Oh,
it. I'm really excited about this. Louise Stowell, I am going to be interviewing her about Otherland, which is another one based on legends and fairy tales and kids going into a magical world. I've just finished reading it. It's absolutely fantastic. I'm really looking forward to that.
I should have had my props ready. I ended up with 2 copies of that book because I ordered one and then the publisher kindly sent me one, and I read an early version, and it's absolutely fantastic. If anybody is a fan of similarly to yours, things that draw on myth and legend but are very funny and dark and fast paced, it's brilliant.
It's really, yes, and she captures that blend of dark and comedy in it. Brilliant, I think.
She does, and Louie's great to listen to. So if you get a chance to tune in to Claire and Louie next time, that'll be great. I certainly will be. So thank you very much. Thank you, Claire. I've really enjoyed speaking to you. I'm going to sign us off now. So thanks everyone for watching.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Welcome to Maclay's Jam Factory, the most inventive jam factory in the world, where chief inventor 9-year-old Scooter Maclay makes flavours like
cherry candy floss jam,
and
blueberry burst jam,
and.
Brussels sprout jam. Ew.
But wait, what's that? An Alien in the Jam Factory by Chrissy Sains. Buy it now in a bookshop near you.
Okay, and we are back to chat in the green room this time. So I'm Amy McCaw, the author of Mina and the Undead, and I'm joined by Claire Fayers, who's the author of Stormhound and other brilliant books that draw on myths and legends. So I really enjoyed chatting to you. Thank you so much for doing that with me.
Thanks, it was great fun, wasn't it?
Yeah, and it's funny how a YA vampire book and a book for younger readers about a feisty dog from Norse mythology can have things in common.
They have stuff in common, yeah.
But I really like that about.
That's a good thing with stories, yeah.
Yeah.
You can always find connections.
Definitely, and I think authors quite often tend to be like-minded people, and particularly authors who are interested in myths and legends as we are. I think we could probably talk for hours and hours, couldn't we?
Definitely.
So I've got some quick fire questions to ask you, a little bit less serious than in the original chat, just as a bonus feature for other people who are watching. So I've got them written down because I would not remember them all. So the first question is, as a writer, what would you choose as your mascot or avatar if you had to choose an animal?
Oh, I wish I'd actually brought him up here. I have a little knitted stormhound that my friend made for me.
Oh yeah, he would be the perfect mascot.
Would be that, yes. Either that or a sheep, but I think the knitted stormhound.
Brilliant, that's the best answer I could have imagined. Do you have a quick writing tip that you could share with people?
Yeah, it's going to take me longer to think of one than just say one, I think. Just try and write something regularly. A lot of people say every day. If you can't do every day, then just try and start a habit of writing, even if it's only a few words.
Yeah, that definitely works for me as well. I completely agree. Okay, even less serious question. If you could only eat one meal and one drink, eat one meal and drink one drink for the rest of your life, what would it be and why?
Okay, the drink would have to be tea. And I would go for green tea because I just like that. I drink gallons of the stuff anyway, so I think I could, I'll cut the rest out, stick with the green tea. Sushi, because it will go nicely with the green tea.
Oh yeah, that's a very cultural response. I think I said pizza and milkshake for mine because I panicked. I'd be stuck with pizza and milkshake forever. Yours is much better. Okay, so Marvel or DC? Controversial.
Oh, I think Marvel. Just.
Well, we were talking about Thor in the other chat, so it only seems right that you should go for Marvel, be loyal to Thor. Bugs Bunny or Mickey Mouse?
Bugs Bunny. He's got the opera one.
True. And what 3 books would you take with you on a desert island or give to an alien who you'd like to learn about life on Earth?
Oh, gosh. This is hideous. Les Miserables. It's one of the ones I reread a lot. The Count of Monte Cristo, because everyone should know how to take revenge on people in style. And The Three Musketeers.
because it's useful to use a sword.
Really good answers. Do you know, to say that was a quick fire round that I just like foisted on you, you did really well with that. And my final question is, what is your favourite book then? If you could only read one book or recommend one book to anybody apart from your own, what would it be?
Ever and ever and ever. I'm going to go with Les Miserables again. Because it's, well, I mean, it's this big. It's about 20 books all rolled into one, and I really do love it.
I have to admit, I haven't read it. Do you think it would be accessible to people who, I've read classics, but I wouldn't say I've read anything quite that dense probably before.
You can get cut down versions of it.
Maybe that's what I need.
I love the whole thing, even when he does have a habit, Victor Hugo, of going off into digressions about when Napoleon lost at Waterloo and the sewer system of Paris, which actually I do tend to skip because it's not great. But apparently when he was getting stuck with writing, he would tell his servants to take his trousers away and hide them so that he couldn't go out until he'd finished writing a chapter, which I really like as a writing tip.
Oh, that you could use that as a quick writing tip. Give somebody your trousers.
Yeah, get somebody to hide your clothes, so you have to stay in and write.
Oh, that's amazing. Again, I don't think I'm going to ask you anything else because I think we need to end on that advice. Give people your trousers if you want to write a good book. Oh, thank you so much. I hope we have another conversation like this in the future outside of the Book Chain project. So that was mine and Claire's episode of the Book Chain project. Thank you to everyone for watching, and we're going to leave it there. So bye for now.
Bye everybody.
Bye. Thank you.
Hi, I hope you enjoyed this week's interview. Next week, Claire is going to be interviewing the amazing Louise Stowell, author of The Dragon in the Library series and Otherland, her newest book. See you then. Bye.